Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. First off, hope everybody had a great holiday. This is the first piece of content that we've done since December 23rd, Christmas Eve. So hope everybody had a great Christmas Eve day, a great Christmas day, spent time with friends, spent time with family. But I kind of want to dive back into the content space, and I want to do it with a player, a person that I've talked about a lot here on the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. That is a 5-star basketball superstar by the name of Caleb Wilson, class of 2025 forward. And we got an interesting recruiting update on him earlier in the week. So it's kind of funny. Okay. So this is a kid we've talked about a lot, and I'll get into some of the particulars here in just a moment, but we talked about him a lot in the fall. Remember, we were doing kind of those Friday recruiting updates going into every single weekend. And then about a month ago, it felt like we were on the verge of a commitment. And so it's funny because I actually went back late last week. The last time we spoke about Caleb Wilson was November 18th, so right before Thanksgiving. And it kind of struck me about 4 or 5 days ago. I said, is there something that I'm missing in this recruitment? It felt like he was on the verge of committing about a month ago. Am I missing anything? I went ahead, made a few phone calls. Well, I bring it up because one, I heard, nothing crazy significant had changed. But two, right when it felt like, okay, this thing has gone stone quiet, what ends up happening? December 23rd, right as I shut down all the content for the holiday, Caleb Wilson put out a report with Joe Tipton on 3. Joe does an amazing job, basically saying that, hey, we didn't commit in December, but the plan is to definitely commit in January. And I think it just sets up an interesting conversation to have about this kid, where his recruitment stands, what could be the factors. By the way, there's even reports that he's already committed and signed, something that I don't necessarily believe. So let's go ahead and dive into this one, who this kid is, what he brings to the table, who's still in the mix, all that good stuff. So with Caleb Wilson, first of all, I know I've mentioned like this element of him and his game many times, but he is one of my favorite players in the class of 2025. Okay. 5-star, top 10 prospect. And really kind of an interesting trajectory as a player, even as a young player still in high school. I think his sophomore year, so 2-3 seasons ago, really kind of was trending as one of the best players in this class. Stature didn't really fall in his junior year, but maybe he didn't quite ascend the way that everybody thought that he would. But we talked about it all fall. I loved how he handled this summer. He played AAU basketball with the Boozer twins, Cam and Caden Boozer. Both of them are committed, of course, to they're both committed to Duke, Carlos Boozer's sons. Cam is, widely believed to be the number 1, number 2, number 3 player in America. And so why I bring it up is because what I was so impressed by was Caleb Wilson's ability to adapt, play with those guys, and really show different facets of his game. Okay, remember, this is a kid that was like a top 2, top 3 player in the country for a lot of this process, and was a player who then goes to play with another superstar over the AAU season. They capture an AAU championship at Peach Jam. But what was interesting about Caleb Wilson is that he kind of vacillated. Maybe that's the right word. Sorry if I messed up my English there, my Noah Webster words here. But I bring it up because he is a kid that, at times this summer was an absolute star. 25 points, 22 points, 22 and 8, 22 and 10, whatever. But he also kind of proved an ability to play with other great players. There were games where Cam Boozer went off and he kind of took, I don't want to say a back seat, but, instead of having 25 and 10, he'd have 10 and 7, or he'd have 10 and 11 or whatever. But the point is, I thought he really showed many different facets to his game. And now I would say early in this senior season of high school basketball, seems like he's really blowing up. Every time I log onto social media, I see some mixtapes, some clips, some this, some that. And I think he's playing with a lot more confidence this year. And I think he is a player that, again, is ascending. And listen, it's going to be so hard. This class is so good. Going to be hard to break through the whatever. But the bottom line is this kid's a stud. And we got some interesting developments on his recruitment over the last couple days, excuse me. So like I said, the reports are that he is set to commit in January. Now, a couple things here. One, I did see a report that he has silently committed to Kentucky and actually already signed his letter of intent. Remember, this is what AJ DeBonsa did about a month or so ago now, signed with BYU, kept it quiet. Nobody knew. And then he, of course, commits on First Take. And then BYU announces that he has, in fact, signed. What I'll say with Caleb Wilson, maybe I'm dead wrong on this, but my sourcing indicates that that is not the case at all. And that's not a bad thing. It's just like the DeBonsa thing was crazy because with DeBonsa, whatever. With DeBonsa, what you have to understand is that there is a very narrow window in the fall when you can actually sign your letter of intent and it's binding going forward, right? So mostly it's kids that have been committed for weeks and months who sign, but DeBonsa was the rare kid who silently committed. And the only reason it didn't become public was because he wanted to commit on First Take. I have that on great authority. Family met with Stephen A. Smith, set the whole thing up, whatever. And so he just signed the letter of intent and was like, hey, we're going to keep this quiet because we want to actually commit on First Take. And so with Caleb Wilson, I just don't think that has happened because the last day to sign the letter of intent was November 20th. I mean, we are now talking about a full month and change, 2 cycles with the holidays, got through Thanksgiving, got through all of December, got through Christmas, and there isn't a word leaked that he has actually signed with Kentucky. And so I don't believe that he has actually signed. That doesn't mean that Kentucky's not in good shape. And what I would say is that I do believe that the recruitment is ultimately coming down to 2 teams, and it feels like it is trending much towards Kentucky. And I don't really think that's all that different than it was a month ago when we talked about it. The 2 schools, in my opinion, that are still in the mix, really, I believe, are Kentucky and Carolina. And I do believe Kentucky's in a great spot. And I think Carolina actually, is in kind of a little bit of a tough spot. Okay. And part of the reason, I'll just be transparent. I think part of it is I think Carolina is not coming from a place of a real strength in the NIL department with these high school players. Okay. Doesn't mean Carolina's broke, doesn't mean they're terrible, doesn't mean they're whatever. But I remember hearing, a month ago, before they even fired Mac Brown from the football side of things, that Carolina really, as not an organization, but as an athletic department, they were really kind of gearing a lot of their financial resources towards football. Now, I understand we have revenue sharing coming, and I understand it's going to balance things out a little bit. But basically, what I was told at Carolina was, I think that administration kind of understands, hey, big picture, college football is the moneymaker. College football is where we don't have to win national championships. We don't have to be Alabama or Ohio State or Texas, but we have to prove that we are competitive and that we're putting out a good product and that we need to be included in whatever the next iteration of college football is. And so what I was told is behind the scenes, there's been a big push administratively, like, hey, we have to prioritize football. Now that has shown up not only with the Bill Belichick hire, but also with the financial resources that were allocated to him. But I also think transparently, I think it's hurt North Carolina basketball in recruiting. A lot of these really good players, they finish top 3, top 5, but can't quite get to the finish line. And I think some of it, at least in some of these cases, is NIL related. AJ DeBonsa, they were in his top 5, couldn't finish the deal, couldn't get him to commit to Carolina. Braylon Mullins commits to UConn. Carolina was in his final 3, can't get over the hump. What was his name? Jasper Johnson. I'm sorry, I tripped. Jasper Johnson committed to Kentucky. One point was believed to be a North Carolina lean. Couldn't get over the finish line. I think NIL played a role, although I think in Jasper Johnson's case, I think he wanted to go to Kentucky. I think he wanted to stay home. I think Braylon Mullins, by the way, too. I just think he really liked the UConn program. But I only bring it up to just basically say this, is that in my opinion, with Carolina, I just think they're in a little bit of a tough spot financially with NIL. By the way, you don't even need my opinion on it. Did you read the AJ DeBonsa report that Matt Norlander put out after he committed? Where basically they acknowledged something that I had heard behind the scenes, which is that Carolina, with the AJ DeBonsa recruitment, they couldn't come up with the money that BYU and some of the other schools could. And so they were kind of selling, and you can look this up. This is in a report on the record. Carolina was kind of selling the branding element of North Carolina, basically saying, hey, and they use this exact reference, which kind of made waves on the internet. But they basically said, look at what Duke did for Zion. We can do the same for you. This is for AJ DeBonsa I'm talking about now. And of course, everybody on the internet made fun of it because it's like, oh, so your pitch to AJ DeBonsa was come here and basically try to do what Duke did. Like, it doesn't even make sense. You're using your biggest rival as a whatever. But I do think that that's part of their sales pitch. The Carolina brand, the branding, Jordan brand, that plays a factor. But this is all a long-winded way of me saying I don't think they have the financials. And so that's the Carolina side of things. And then there's the Kentucky side of things. And I don't want to sell everything else, but first of all, I think the NIL is in a little bit of a stronger place in Kentucky right now. Remember, we have another about 5 months of essentially Wild Wild West NIL. Then it's supposed to kind of slow down with this revenue sharing stuff coming in mid-April. But if kids commit, if they sign, if they get to, you can get them in under the gun with these crazy offers and these crazy prices. And I'm not saying Kentucky is doing it, but what I am saying is look at the football portal right now. People are spending like crazy because they're like, this is the last real cycle where we might just be able to spend whatever we want without any real oversight from the NCAA. So I think Kentucky's in a pretty good place. And I know I'm rambling, but I also want to say, like, I think there's a lot of other variables that matter for Kentucky and why Kentucky is in such good shape in this recruitment. And it's pretty straightforward, right? It's one, listen, I know Kentucky's coming off the disappointing loss to Ohio State. It's been a while since we've seen the Wildcats on the court. Last Saturday was not pretty. But Mark Pope has largely lived up to expectations. I think, frankly, he's exceeded them. I know the Ohio State loss was bad, but you're sitting at 10-2, about a third of the way through your first regular season as Kentucky head coach. Any thoughts that he couldn't coach in the SEC or he couldn't coach against the big boys? I think he's doing just fine. Now, you got to get the sour taste of the Ohio State game out of your mouth, but you beat Duke, you beat Gonzaga. By the way, Caleb Wilson was in the building for the Gonzaga game, or for the Kentucky Duke game, in Atlanta. And so you've seen it now firsthand. You've seen what this system is, what it looks like, the role that you can play in it. And I think the other variable that's very important for this recruitment, of course, is the fact that you're very close with a lot of the kids that are already committed in this class. Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno, Caden Lewis. I remember talking about this back in September. All these guys are commenting on each other's posts and their Instagram this and their Twitter that and whatever. And so I just bring it up because I think he being Caleb Wilson, already has a great relationship with a lot of these kids. I think Mark Pope has delivered. Listen, again, take out Ohio State, number 2 in the country right now in scoring, top 50 in three-pointers made, a lot of three-pointers attempted. They're playing the way he promised he would play. And the offense, although it's struggled recently, has looked pretty good. And I think that is a great sales pitch for Caleb Wilson. So I could go on and on. But what I will say, I think Kentucky, you should still feel, if you're a Kentucky fan, feel like you're in pretty good shape. I think Kentucky's going to be fine. One concern I would say is the longer this thing goes on, the more it allows anyone else to get back in the mix. It doesn't have to necessarily be North Carolina. It could be anybody, but you'd think Kentucky can get that commitment soon. It sounds like Caleb Wilson is ready to commit soon, and I expect him to be a Kentucky Wildcat when it's all said and done. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Make sure you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day, except for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. We are on the road to, we're not even on the road to 50K. I can see the exit for 50K subscribers. I need your help to get there, though. Make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure to like this video so it shoots up the algorithm. I appreciate your support. And we'll be back talking all things college football, college basketball, because I got my 2 days off. I feel rested, recharged, and I'm ready to talk ball, people.